David Carr, former number one overall pick by the Texans back in 2002, now a network analyst for NFL Network. You can see NFL Network with David Carr on it, NFL Total Access, which airs Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 7 Eastern. Good to see you again. The Caleb Williams situation here, where his dad came out and said, maybe he doesn't go to Arizona. Was there any thought that you weren't going to go to the Texans, that you didn't want to go to the Texans when you were going to be the number one pick?
No. I think this is just such a different world, man, where, I understand. I get it. Like, I don't necessarily love what's going on in Arizona. It doesn't give me warm and fuzzy feelings about playing there with what I've seen going on. So I don't blame Caleb. I would do the same thing. I never had that opportunity. I was just so excited to be able to play in the NFL. I was so naive, though. I didn't know the Texans were going to. This franchise, new franchise, I was kind of just excited to play. I didn't know we weren't going to be able to compete. It's like, it's fair, right? This isn't the WAC. This isn't Fresno State. We're gonna be able to compete with the Ohio States, and we're gonna be able to get in there with the Texans and compete with all these other guys. Now we were so far behind. So
do you think if you had gone, I've mentioned that Mahomes going to the Chiefs, some of these guys, established quarterbacks now, went to better situations. That 10 picks is so, that's a huge difference when you're going to a team that has a really good coach and some skilled position players. Do you think if you had gone later in the draft, but maybe to a better team, that maybe you would have had a better career instead of getting sacked 65 times every year?
Yeah, there's no doubt. I think about that all the time. So I remember even being in Pittsburgh, playing in a preseason game, and here comes Ben Roethlisberger, picked in the middle of the first round, and I'm like, this is all they need. They just need a quarterback. They got a great football team. Yeah. And there's situations like that all over the place. You see where Aaron Rodgers lands. He sits there for a while, and he's got to be on TV and be in that awkward green room moment where, oh man, they haven't taken. Well, he lands in a perfect place with a Hall of Fame quarterback to kind of show him the ropes, even though it was a little rocky at the beginning. He got to jump right in there. So, there's no doubt, man. It's Tom Coughlin used to always tell me, you're only good as the guys around you, and this is a team for a reason. Inside our Super Bowl rings, when I got to the New York Giants, it says team. It literally, that's the only word on the inside of the rings. So, yeah, this is the best sport in the world because of that. Because it's not individually based. There are individual players that can stand out and make plays, but you're only as good as your left tackle. And if your left tackle is Tony Baselli, who can't lift his arm, and you put your right tackle over there, and he tears the ACL in the first week of traiing camp, and now you're trying guys out on Tuesday to go play Dwight Freeney in Indy. It's going to be bad, man. So yeah, it was rough.
Why did the Rams move on from Jared Goff?
I think that teams get enamored with first of all, I think that Sean McVay obviously is one of the best play callers in our league, and I think that he saw an opportunity. Here's what happened. Bill Belichick exposed his offense. He really brought a lot of pressures, and Sean isn't really a guy that will pick up the blitzes, like that will change protection and kind of handle that stuff. And so he had a weakness, and he went out and said, Matt Stafford is the best quarterback in the league at beating the blitz and making off-schedule plays. And so he pinpointed that, and Jared wasn't necessarily that guy, right? Mm-hmm. But the system had a little bit to do with that as well. So Sean brilliantly grabs Matt, inserts him in, and we saw it. We saw the pressure-beating ability, the sidearm no-look throws into those pressure looks. We saw it all the way into the Super Bowl. And that's why he did it. That's why teams go out, because it's not necessarily just Jared Goff's fault, because now we see him in the kickoff game and he's leading the Detroit team. Who would have thought that? I'm so happy for him. It's great. He has the ability, second-level throws, intermediate-level throws. Jared's as good as anybody in the league. And that offensive system that they have in Detroit they live in that world. They live in the play-action pass, that 15 to 20-yard throw area. He's great there. So it was just a fit thing. Sean McVay pinpointed a weakness in his scheme, and he had to get better because he wasn't going to change who he was. He wasn't going to all of a sudden just start taking guys out of the pass route and protecting, that wasn't him. He's going to move the pocket, play action, spread them out, be aggressive, and attack. So he had to find a guy that fit that role, and that was perfect.
Give me something odd that could happen. Every year, something happens where you go, oh, my God, who would have predicted that? Like Jalen Hurts leading the Eagles to the Super Bowl. Brock Purdy is going to play for the start for the Niners in the NFC title game. You got one that you'd go, here's one for you. Keep an eye on this.
Yeah. Yeah, Justin Fields, for me, when I watched the film, he's as good as any quarterback in the league throwing the ball at that intermediate level down the field. And we saw it at Ohio State. And what I think the biggest question mark for me is, can Chicago pair a scheme to this guy's talent? Because he ran for 1,100 yards. I mean, he has so much ability. He's farther along than Jalen Hurts was, just in my opinion, as far as being able to put pressure on the defense. He has all that raw talent. And he has the ability to push the ball down the field. When I watch it, schematically, they limited him, and they made it very difficult for him. But
okay, so what's your bold prediction of Justin Fields then, or the Bears?
They can win that division for sure.
Okay,
they absolutely can. So I think that, and then he can be on the fast track to being an All-Pro player. Like that's how good I think he can be. So, but I think the offensive staff they got to carry their weight. They run a system that's similar to Green Bay or somebody like Kyle Shanahan. Like that's kind of the world they live in. And it's not necessarily what like Philly does, or what they're going to do in Indy with Richardson. Like it's got to be adapted a little bit. So that's my question mark. And if they can answer that question, then they're going to be a good football team.
David Carr, NFL Network analyst, the former number 1 overall pick by the Houston Texans, joining us on the program. Every year I tempt myself. Sometimes I go too far, and I go, this is the year for the Chargers. Okay. And they always prove me wrong that it's not the year of the Chargers. Is this year any different?
I like Justin Herbert a lot, and I think that's not like saying this this outlandish statement. Anybody that watches the film or sees this guy play quarterback from the time that he stepped on the field in a weird situation with Tyrod Taylor, like he just gets it. He sees the field very well, spatial awareness and timing and zip on the ball. I don't know if there's anyone better than him in the pocket. So Kellen Moore coming over from Dallas. He's a vertical passing guy. We saw the Cowboys, and they didn't have the success from a win standpoint, but we saw them really push the ball on the field, and he's got a lot more ability than Dak in that world. So they have the tools. Eckler's still there. They have vertical elements in their passing and big physical wide receivers, tight end. So I think the question is going to be, can they handle situational stuff? And that's really been the issue. We watch them. They always score, move the ball. But, man, it's like I watched some of that situational stuff, and that's what Coughlin used to just preach. I keep going back to that, but it's like that's what it is. Like at the end of the day, it's about winning situations and about handling those correctly. And if you don't work through that, like every Friday we would go in, me, Eli, and Tom, and we would watch teams mess up situations for an hour. He would just, and it was from the last week. We didn't have to go back in time. Like there were an hour's worth of film of head coaches just screwing it up. And we would sit there and say, what would we do here? What would we do in this? And there's a reason that they won 2 Super Bowls there. You have to dial in on that. So it's not a quarterback thing. It's not a talent thing. It's get the thing right in the last 2 minutes of the game. So that sits on Staley for sure. But if they can do that, they absolutely have enough talent. No doubt.
Who goes farther, the Jets or the Giants?
Well, now you're tugging at my heartstrings now, man. So I think that so Waller for me is the best matchup from an offensive standpoint in the league if he's healthy. So last year he was dealing with a hamstring. They still know he's dealing with a hamstring, so they're going to have to put him on a pitch count. So they had to pull him out of practice in New York because Daniel wouldn't stop throwing the football. And I don't blame him because he's open. Like unless you have Derwin James on your team, he's going to be open every time, right? So and there's only one of those guys. So it's going to be great. I think it's going to be fun for New York fans in general because the fact that the Jets have obviously Aaron Rodgers, and he's inserted himself there. They're going to be a good football team. They beat the Bills last year with Zach Wilson, and they almost did it again with Mike White. So you're going to tell me that they add Aaron and they're not going to be a good football team? Like, that's going to happen. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I think that Isaiah Simmons, like adding him to Wink's defense, I think that defense is going to be a top 10 defense. And I think offensively, adding Waller, if he can stay healthy, Saquon's going to have a monster year. That's why I picked him first in my fantasy draft. Saquon Barkley. So he's going to have extra running lanes. He ran against the loaded boxes. I mean, it was every time for him. So they needed a guy to kind of pull coverage, and they have that guy. Like Brian Daboll is great. He's great schematically, but he also brought over a physical a mentality that you have to have in New York, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun, man. So I'll say Giants, but man, the Jets are going to be a great team. That's a tough division.
Kansas City Chiefs without Chris Jones and perhaps without Travis Kelce, a bigger loss, Chris Jones or Travis Kelce?
Tough, man. I think I always said that they were the same person on both sides of the ball because Travis gets a lot of attention, but Chris is the guy that when I just happened to pop on the network the other day and they're showing the AFC Championship game. And so I started watching it, and every time they needed a stop or a play on third down, Chris made it. And like, well, what are you going to do now? You know, I love Steve Spagnuolo. He was my defense coordinator in New York, but he's going to have to bring extra pressure. They're going to have to put themselves in vulnerable positions now with that young secondary. Like, they don't have the ability to just rush forward and get there because they're an average defense. You know, so now you have an average defense without a game wrecker like Chris Jones. You're going to have to kind of create pressure with guys coming off edges. That puts your back end in some suspect situations. But on the other side, now you don't have – I saw the same thing in the same game, right? Third down, fourth down. Like, I saw Pat Mahomes turn down an easy first down throw on fourth down to push the ball down the field to Travis Kelce for a touchdown. That he wasn't open. Like, he was not open. So it's like there's so many times in the game where you watch Patrick after he's gone through his progression, where's Travis? And then they just kind of do their thing. And he's not there, right? For at least tonight.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be an issue for them unless Pat can do what he did last year. So when he lost Tyreek, everyone's like, oh, they're not going to be good. And all I did was say, well, all he has to do is start to become, and I said it, and people were like, oh, my gosh. He's just scratching the surface on how good he can be because physically he does all this exciting stuff, but he hadn't quite yet mastered ripping through progressions and getting it to the open guy in space. And he's just kind of scratching the surface of that, and he did an excellent job of that last year. He's going to be asked to really, really elevate that, you know, tonight and the next couple of weeks if Travis is going to be around because that's a big ask, man. We haven't seen him play without Travis Kelce or Tyreek Hill since his very first start, Week 17, when it didn't matter. We just haven't seen it, so we have no idea what they're going to look like.
Always great to catch up with you. Appreciate your insights.
You too, buddy.
Thank you. That's David Carr, NFL Network analyst. Fritzy, of course, is big on the New Orleans Saints this year, winning the NFC South. I think it was because we were going to have David Carr on. Therefore, Fritzy was talking about Derek Carr yesterday.
Could have been a little of that. There may have been a little of that.
That's what I thought.